Hello everyone, we have a special guest today, Dr. Roman Töppel, and he
Hello.
also is one of the publishers of the critical edition of Mein Kampf. And we are in Munich, so it's quite obvious, let's talk about Hitler. And mainly about the issue that, especially in the memoirs of German generals, they basically wrote everything like, we would have won if it wasn't for Hitler. So they blame everything, all defeats on Hitler, and everything that was successful, more or less, was credit to them. And the question is, how valid is this and what is the background? So you did quite some research on this.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics because I get steamed up when I read all these lies. I don't get steamed up when I read something, misread something, or he made a mistake. But when I see that you get all these lies and it's so obvious, and this is from the memoirs. So many historians still today quote from the memoirs and say, "Oh, Manstein wrote this, and Guderian said this," but you have all the files left. And this was a problem in the first 20 years after Second World War. The Allies had confiscated the German war diaries and all these files, and so no German historian had access to them. And so the only Germans who had access to the original war diaries were the generals, and they did their work for the Americans, for the historical division, because the American historical division from the United States historical division, they wanted to know how to fight Russia. Give us your experience, and so here are the files, you can work with them. And so the generals made the point that they said, even we have it written down, that they said, okay, we will build a monument for the Wehrmacht, and all this blame goes to Hitler. Yeah, and this lives on till today. And when you look into these battles, you always find, no, this is not the case. There was at least one general, always, you find always or almost always, in the cases I have looked at, it's always you find one general or one military leader or economical leader who says, we should do this. This works. Even when all the generals or almost all the generals were against it, and Hitler had this idea, but he had not the skills to put it in practical work. That's how Manstein wrote it down in his diary. He says, Hitler is a genius. He has great ideas, but he needs someone to put it down so it's feasible. It's doable in practical work. He has these ideas like an artist, but he needs someone to do it.
Somebody to implement it.
And in all the cases I have looked at, it's always that at least one general says, Mein Führer, we can do this. And even when all the others say, it's not possible, we can't go through the Ardennes, or we can't attack there in Donetsk Basin. But when one says, Mein Führer, it's possible, then Hitler said, okay, let's go for it. And when in the cases when no one was with Hitler, when they all said, we can't do this, like in many cases when preparing the Kursk offensive, Hitler wanted to attack the Donetsk Basin. All the generals said, no, we can't do this. And Hitler wanted to attack the Kursk salient from the front. And all the generals say, we can't do this. So Hitler says, okay, it's not possible. I believe you, drop it. But when he found one general, it was not always one, sometimes it's more, but then he said, we can do it. And often it's even the other way around. These days I looked at the Operation Lüttich, the counterattack at Mortain, when the Germans wanted to cut off the American breakthrough in Normandy. And all the generals wrote after World War II, it was Hitler's idea and his fault. All the generals warned him that this was a stupid idea. When you look at the files, it's the other way around. All the generals wanted this attack. Yeah, so this is just memoir and nonsense. And what puzzles me and what makes me a bit angry is that you still have so many professional historians who still fall for this.
Yeah. I mean, it's a simple excuse. In some cases, also Goering sometimes comes up. Although I noticed in one book that for arguing for the Battle of the Atlantic using the Focke-Wulf 200, and Jürgen Rohr, one of the leading German naval historians, wrote, yeah, it was not feasible. And I think Milner wrote as well. Mark Milner, Canadian, I think. And recently a new book came out, and he notes, yeah, Goering was against.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No, and it was a book, and this was from 2018, the book, and was published by Oxford.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay.
Exactly.
And also no footnote.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's the cheap way, and the thing is here, the Hitler and Goering were dangerous men. So, and they were not idiots. So just blaming them is like, sometimes I see this for some people, they hate them, understandably, but just declaring them as stupid because you dislike them, that's dangerous territory in any way.
It's
just you disagree with someone, or you think he's politically or personally abhorrent. Be careful. Because know your enemy and understand your enemy.
It's underestimated. One famous German historian said it's always the history of Hitler is the history of his underestimation. And if we do this, we can never understand how it happened that so many Germans loved Hitler, that so many generals said, this, like Manstein and others, and Dönitz, the Führer is a genius. Yeah, and we can never understand this if we read all this post-war. Don't want to say this word. And how could they follow such an idiot? Yeah, and he was not that idiot. He was seen as a genius at that time. And one example is, maybe you told me that you are interested in the Messerschmitt 262. 262, and this is the same case. I read about this, and all the generals said, "Oh, it was Hitler. The Me 262 did not come out because he wanted it to be equipped as a bomber." But it was from the beginning of the development. It was clear that this was a fighter and was also a bomber, a Jabo, a fighter bomber, and so it had nothing to do with that decision. It did not. You know,
I mean, the whole argument that because you strap bombs on it, the development is delayed by several months. Really? For bomb racks?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I made a video on this, I think, in 2016.
Okay.
And it doesn't add up with everything. And it was by far not as effective as what.
Yeah.
And it was allowed. But this is, it's just, let's blame that guy. And it's an oversimplification. Oversimplifications, I mean, they make for good myths and sometimes for funny arguments, but in the long run, they will bite you in the back.
Exactly.
In my experience. So,
yeah.
Well, anything to add?
Maybe one thing from the naval history. We have talked about Luftwaffe, Air Force, and we have talked about tanks, and it is an idea that I had when Hitler. So we should go away from this whole the whole thing that we think that Hitler said, "Oh, I give this order and you have to do it." One example is when Hitler said to Dönitz that he had heard that so many Allied sailors survived after their ships were torpedoed, and he suggested to Dönitz, "We should kill the sailors. We should shoot them after." And Dönitz talked him out of that. And Hitler said, "Okay, if you are against it, so drop it." But if Hitler had been this, always the dictator said, "I want this, and we do this, and you have to kill these American or Allied sailors," then, but it was not. He listened to his generals, not always, but more often than we think.
I guess probably in the final year of the war, in the last, he changed something.
Yeah, he distrusted everyone. He almost distrusted, and he there was more like he lived more and more in his own world, in his bunker world, and he mistrusted everyone, and there were more these irrational, reactions. Yeah, but the cases I have looked into and the campaign in the West or the Operation Barbarossa and Kursk is always that Hitler had someone or some people, and sometimes many people, sometimes just one, who said, "Okay, we can do this." Yeah.
I mean, I think one example of the Kriegsmarine would also be that the Kriegsmarine very early on pushed for a war against the United States.
Yeah.
And then he finally declared war in December 1941. So it's also arguable how much that was influenced by the strategic view that Raeder and the others in the Kriegsmarine had.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for watching.
And see you next time. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Now, Dr. Roman Töppel and I will soon meet again, and we already have a certain list of topics and questions we will tackle. But if you have a good topic or a good question, please add them. No guarantee it will be answered or covered, but chances are pretty good if it's an interesting aspect we like to discuss. So ideally write them in the comment section,
also on Twitter, or if you're a Patreon supporter or subscribe to supporter, write me there. Okay, thank you very much and see you next time. Bye.